Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everybody. I think I probably ought to start by declaring an interest because as well as being leader of Manchester City Council and chair of the Core Cities Cabinet, I'm also director of Manchester Airport Group, and of course the City Council is one of the principal shareholders in that. That's by no means a parochial interest, because that means, as well as one of the London airports, we also own 3 regional airports, so a wide-ranging interest coming out of that. I want to thank Sir Howard for his very, very interesting presentation. Clearly, a lot of work has gone into the Commission and their findings so far, but it's probably me that's guilty of this. I wasn't actually aware of the original question that they'd been asked, and that this was a matter of the status as a global hub for aviation of this country. And I will be tempted to say, no, I'm not tempted to say, I will say that I think that's really the wrong question. It's certainly not the question that Core Cities would ask. I'm speaking on behalf of Core Cities UK. Became Core Cities UK earlier this year with the addition of Glasgow and Cardiff to our membership. The question that Core Cities will be asking is really about how we can, all of us, boost our economic performance in a way that not only benefits our cities and the regions that we're at the heart of, but also benefits the economy of the UK as a whole. That's important when we look at UK cities and compare them with the best performing cities, say in Germany. We underperform in comparison. Attached to that, we recognise that connectivity, transport connectivity, is a key element of how we enhance our performance. And virtually all of these cities outside of London and the South East have disbenefited from a lack of investment over very, very many decades in virtually every aspect of transport infrastructure, including that supports aviation. Each of those 10 cities also has an airport, and they all have a direct, don't own them, certainly not, but they all have an interest. They range from the relatively small airports like Doncaster Robin Hood Airport right through to Manchester, clearly the largest, but Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, all with a significant proportion of long-haul flights nowadays. So an enormous range there. And those airports function differently, have different roles within the marketplace. And clearly elements of freight. Nottingham's airport is certainly a major player in the freight market. I'm talking about East Midlands, of course. All of them will have an element of leisure. Some of them will be significant feeders into other hubs, and a small number of them will have a significant number of scheduled full-service flights, both long-haul and shorter distance. And perhaps the other thing they all have in common is that they all have spare runway capacity. None of them, I think, at the moment are looking to build a second runway. What they're looking to do is to fill the ones that they've already got. They all do have a shared interest in rebalancing the economy, a phrase that's been around a lot over the last year or so. But for Core Cities, it's rebalancing the economy not at the expense of London and the South East. We're not just interested in moving the deck chairs around. What we're interested in is getting above average growth in our own cities in order to rebalance the economy. But if it's not at the expense of London, nor do we want to see excessive investment in London's transport infrastructure that further distorts the economy at the expense of other parts of the United Kingdom. And there does get a point in certain places where you start to get the diseconomies of scale. Effectively, it is transport investment just to plug gaps rather than to promote growth. And you also get a position that investment follows investment, and other parts of the country, almost out of necessity, then lose out. And that is something that has been happening for a very long period of time. It's interesting in what Sir Howard had to say about the economic benefit figures that the Commission has produced for the 3 options for London runway expansion. And the phrase that I think Sir Howard used was that would ripple to other parts of the UK economy. I have to say I have a certain amount of scepticism about that. I would like to see the evidence. Rippling to me sounds a little bit like trickle down. And trickle down, well, if it ever did, it really was a trickle. And I think the rest of the UK rather wants more than a trickle when it comes to its ambitions for the growth of its economies. And in this context, airports are important. They are key parts of growing regional economies. And I was at a session at the airport this morning looking at devolution, and the MD of Airport Developments here talked about the direct and indirect contribution to the northwest economy of Manchester Airport of around £1.5 billion per annum. 44,000 jobs. And of course there are other benefits beyond those. There are the benefits in terms of tourism, in terms of being a port of entry, in terms of being able to attract foreign direct investment and being able to retain indigenous investment. And in this sense, direct connectivity is very, very important. You might get away with one stop, one change, but once you're beyond that, and particularly if you have to have modal changes, then the ability to attract investment starts to disappear very, very rapidly indeed, which is one of the obvious reasons why most foreign direct investment in this country currently goes to London, because it has that direct connectivity. The more other places have similar levels of connectivity, the more they are able to attract the investment that they need. An example, so I know Newcastle were on the platform earlier today. Newcastle, of course, are one of the big supporters of the expansion of Heathrow. That's also because they're one of the small number of regional airports with relatively good links to Heathrow. But when Newcastle got a direct flight to Australia via Emirates, within a 5-year period, what was £100 million worth of trade became £300 million worth of trade. Having those direct connections makes a big, big difference. Having mentioned Newcastle, that leads me into saying core cities have different views on connectivity with London. All of them believe connectivity with London is important, because we'd be mad to think otherwise. Not to be well connected to the most important economic generator in the country would be bad for all of us. We do need good connections with London. Increasingly, of course, those connections are by rail, and those rail connections, not just with London, but intercity connections, will be enhanced with High Speed 2 and the sort of projects that are coming out of the One North work. In terms of air connections, that's rather more limited and rather more varied. Air connections really are about air links. They are about international connectivity. There is some dependency on the slots available for regional links, something that, again, Sir Howard talked about. But as we discovered with at least 2 operators out of Manchester Airport, actually sustaining direct links to London airports is somewhat more difficult nowadays, because there are alternatives, not only the alternatives of direct flights, but of those other international hubs. And Amsterdam we've talked about a lot, but Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, further afield, but also, if you're really desperate, you've got Charles de Gaulle as well. Even I prefer Heathrow to Charles de Gaulle, but let's not go there. Air passengers prefer local. They don't want to be travelling large distances. They do want something that's as close as possible. And it seems to me something fundamentally wrong at the moment, where there are 4 million passengers per year from the north having to trek down to Heathrow to get flights, when a lot of those people could be serviced by flights a lot closer to home. And because they're a lot closer to home, it would also have an impact on the carbon figures that, again, Sir Howard was talking about. The demand is there, demand for both more short-haul and long-haul flights. The passengers exist. I think also really pleased that this discussion is taking place at all, that we are talking about the importance of the regional dimension, because I think there has become a danger, certainly amongst opinion formers, amongst decision makers, amongst the media, that they've stopped talking about UK runway capacity, and they've only really been talking about London runway capacity. And there may well be a need to increase that London capacity. It's not necessarily something that will benefit the whole of the country. It's often talked about in terms of a hub. I think it's a phrase that Sir Howard used earlier on, was talking about the question being status as a global hub for aviation. I'm not sure that we really have a hub at the moment, and I'm not sure we really need a hub at the moment. Certainly agree with Sir Howard, we don't need a super hub out in the Thames estuary, and we certainly don't want to be spending £50 billion of public money on an idea which is frankly, I think, bonkers. And notwithstanding the desire of the Mayor of London to resurrect that, and clearly as long as we have a government with at least some element of prudence, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Even with an extra runway, I don't think we're really talking about a hub. And for Heathrow as an interliner, there are actually more people go from Heathrow to other hubs in Europe than use Heathrow as a hub itself. It's clearly our most important airport, but it doesn't fulfil the role as a hub in that way. And in some ways, talking about hubs is harking back to the notion of national carriers. And I have to say, it is a long, long time since we had a national carrier operating out of this country. Certainly, even if Heathrow was a hub, it's not a national hub. I think the UK is probably a mixture of both being too small and too big to have a national hub. It's too small, say, in comparison to the United States, where you have to have a number of hubs simply because of the immense spaces between the centres of population. It's too big, say, in comparison to the Netherlands, where one airport, Schiphol, can serve all of the major centres of population within the Netherlands. It can be a hub for the whole country. So, where do I think we ought to be going? And most of what I have to say has question marks at the end of it. Certainly we need to be making best use of existing capacity. And certainly once we start having High Speed 2 in place, and High Speed 2 will be in place probably at least as quickly as new runway capacity will be in place, then that makes it just as easy to be able to travel to Birmingham, to Manchester, or to other airports to be able to get long-haul scheduled flights. The choices become different, and they might be different to assess, but they become a lot easier to assess if some planning goes behind them to try and make them happening. We've certainly got that 10 to 15 year period without that new runway capacity, whatever happens, and we need to make sure that we do invest to make best use of what we've got. For expansion, there are issues about affordability. There are very, very serious issues about state aid. Even £5 billion to support expansion at Heathrow, I think, would certainly raise very, very serious questions in the European Commission around state aid. And there are going to be issues around air quality. I think there is a real question for me about the extent to which we should be continuing to use public money to further enhance what is a southeast monopoly, and in the sense that Heathrow and Gatwick are still regulated airports, that being a monopoly is official, not something, a name I'm just attaching to them. I think it's a question whether that is in the wider public interest, and I think there is certainly a very, very serious question about whether that will do anything at all to rebalance the economy in the positive way that I described it earlier. I suggest a lot of that public money would be better spent on improving intercity connectivity, nothing to do with airports whatsoever, but also in improving access, ground transport access to any number of regional airports. I think that money would also be better used in eliminating some of the other distortions in the market, and I'm thinking particularly now of APD, air passenger duty, which is a real issue for regional airports, and an issue that's likely to be made worse by the devolution package that is being offered to Scotland. Ultimately, whatever happens, what I think this country does need is, whether or not being let's get the phrase again, a global hub for aviation is the right thing to be. What we do need is a whole range of very efficient, very effective, competitive regional airports that are not diminished in any way in their ability to enhance their own regional economies for the benefit of the UK as a whole.